Okay, this is chapter 2, the first verse in the book of Genesis. Oh, man. Okay, so actually the comment that I'm taking from Rashi is on the second verse. Let's read it, although the English here is already an interpretation. I'll change the translation from the English a little bit. Thus the heaven and earth were finished and all their array. Now, the literal Hebrew goes on, and God finished his work on the seventh day. And God finished on the seventh day his work which he had done. And then it says, and he abstained or stopped on the seventh day for all the work that he has done. Now, what bothers all the commentators, but Rashi in particular, here is, if I read it literally, if you say he stopped on the seventh day, that sounds like he did some work on the seventh day. Seventh day, let's say, is 24 hours. To say he stopped, he completed his work on the seventh day, means he could have worked for the first 2 hours out of 24. He did work, he did the completing of the work on the seventh day. Vayishbos, which can be translated the way you're translated here, he abstained, that sounds like the whole 24 hours of the seventh day he didn't do any work. So reading it literally and simplistically, you would have a contradiction. And by the way, I think that would be my recommendation when you're trying to understand this text. Start reading it like a 10-year-old. Oh, okay, I have a dictionary, and this is what the dictionary tells me what the words mean. I put it together. Don't use any imagination. Don't project any sophistication. Just read it like a 10-year-old. If you get into trouble, then you know that something needs to be done. If you don't get into trouble, then you've got it. But here, reading it like a 10-year-old, you say he finished on the seventh day. That means he did some work on the seventh day. If you say he abstained from work on the seventh day, he didn't do any work on the seventh day. So then there's a problem. So Rashi is addressing that problem. Now let's see how he handles it. Rabbi Shimon said, a human being, flesh and blood, who cannot exactly know his times and moments, he can't assess the time exactly. I'm always amused by the clocks that you see, let's say in shuls, or the electric clocks, right, which give the time down to the second. But who set the clock? It's set to the second to Greenwich Mean Time, and who's watching the mechanism in Greenwich? They're not using radium atoms, the vibration of radium atoms, and now there are quantum techniques that can keep time up to a trillionth of a second, right? They're not using those in Greenwich. So, you're writing it to the second, but you don't know that your clock is in tune with the real time. At any rate, so he says, human beings, certainly in the vast majority of time this text existed, a human being can't know the time exactly. So, if a human being, if it wants to keep Shabbos, what does he do? He doesn't wait till exactly Shabbos to stop his work. He stops early. He stops what he thinks is 10 minutes early. If he's making a mistake, it'll only be 8 minutes early, but it'll be early. And for sure, he won't do any work on Shabbos. That's why he has to add from the profane to the holy, some portion of Friday afternoon he has to dedicate to not doing any malacha, not doing any work, so that he'll make sure that the 24 hours of Shabbos he won't do any work. But the Holy One, blessed be He, who knows His time. No, this is a different one. Hello? This is a different. It's not the same sheet. That's why I didn't hand them out. No, I see that I'm going to have to make more now. There are 9 sheets out, so maybe a couple of you can look on together. The Holy One, blessed be He, who knows His times and moments exactly, entered it within a hairbreadth. In other words, he started the Shabbos performance of no work exactly at the time when Shabbos really started. Now, when someone's looking at that, a human being is looking at that, and a human being is calculating the time at which God does what He does, it's going to seem to the human being that he stepped over the line into Shabbos, because he's going to be doing work Friday afternoon at a time when no human being would do work, because the human being would stop early, because the human being wouldn't be able to be sure that he didn't do work on Shabbos if he didn't add time and stop early. So this phrase in the Torah, which says that he finished his work on the seventh day, is describing how it would look to an observer. It's not describing the exact reality of the situation. It's describing how it would look to an observer. Now this is, Rashi has another pshat in a moment, but this is a very radical idea. And it's an idea which you have fairly commonly in the Torah and the Tanakh as a whole. I think many people assume that the Tanakh is exact, perfect, and absolutely truthful, and it's written to describe the objective reality as it is, and if you do understand it or you don't understand it or it doesn't agree with your perceptions, you have to adjust to what the Tanakh is saying, and it's not something that you would not explain the words in the Tanakh as words which describe how it looks to you, even though it's not really true. But that's not the case. That's not the case. For example, in Deuteronomy, where it says that you're going to conquer the land of Israel, and you will conquer cities fortified to the heavens. So the rabbis of the Talmud already commented, this is an exaggeration. There are no cities fortified to the heavens. What, with walls 1,000 miles high? 10,000 miles high? What are we talking about? No, what it means is that when you look at the walls, you're going to think, this is impossible. It's impregnable, it's impossible to conquer, it's just beyond any hope. You'll feel that you're confronting something that's absolutely impossible, as if it were fortified to the skies. So there the Torah is describing our feeling for it, even though it isn't literally true. Much, much more common and serious philosophically are the hundreds of physical descriptions of God in the Torah, in the Tanakh. Hundreds. And from our point of view, none of them are true. God isn't a physical thing at all. And the explanation that's given is that for many people, if they don't get a description in physical terms, they can't deal with the description at all. They can't relate to it. Today, with modern science, we're a little bit more flexible mentally to say that things don't have to be the way they appear to us. We know that there are hidden structures and things. If you look at little quantum mechanics, they can be very mysterious. In ancient times, even as close to us as the Rambam, people say if it isn't like a mountain or a cloud or a mouse or a pebble or an arrow or water, it isn't. If it isn't like that, it isn't. Just isn't. That's all there is. And to placate people like that, the Tanakh used hundreds of physical descriptions of God with the hope that with further education, it can be explained to them that God isn't physical, and with even further education, it can be explained to them what we can and cannot say about God, and how we understand all of these physical descriptions as communicating something, but not communicating the physical that it sounds like on the surface. So Rashi is introducing a principle, which in this case is local to this particular verse, but it's a principle that applies over and over again. Yeah.
So, I don't remember if we touched on this, but the concept of rest, we're saying it's just
Let's see. We didn't use the word rest yet. I'm only doing the first two verses. But I think, since you asked it, the word rest has a meaning and it has a connotation in context. I'll give you an example. This guy's playing golf, and he hits the ball from the tee, and he said it was a magnificent shot. The ball landed on the green of the next hole and came to rest 2 inches from the cup. The ball came to rest. Was the ball catching its breath? Was the ball relaxing its muscles? Was the ball gathering strength for the next move? Came to rest means it stopped moving. Sof pasuk, that's what it means. Rest is the opposite of motion. And all of the physical connotations of rest that we appropriate is when human beings stop moving, then their muscles rest, then they gain more strength, then they feel happier, and so forth and so on. But that's the feeling of something at rest, not the rest. Rest means not moving. So I think that's the concept of rest that you have to apply in the verse. Don't infer from it that God was tired and he had to relax and he needed space and so on and so on. None of that is in the word rest. It's only in what happens to people when they're at rest. And that of course, is not going to apply to God. Okay, but that's not what we're dealing with right at the moment. So this is the first explanation Rashi gives. The second explanation, I think, requires some fairly deep philosophical work. Another explanation. What was the world lacking? Rest. Sabbath came, and so came rest. The work was completed and finished. He didn't do any work on Shabbos. Why does the verse say he finished his work on Shabbos? Because by not doing any work on Shabbos, he created something which the world needed. By not doing any work, he created something the world needed. Something came into being on Shabbos that didn't exist before. Something the world needed. It's called rest. And God it was part of his malacha. Part of his malacha was, by not doing malacha, he created rest. Now that sounds like just fancy gobbledygook. That doesn't sound clear, and it sounds like you're making it up, and it sounds like you can't take it seriously. But I think something very deep is going on here. We understand God, Kodesh Baruch Hu, as the creator of everything. Everything. Matter and energy and space-time and ideas and concepts and meanings, numbers, geometrical figures, qualities, everything. What about principles? Principles of logic, principles of the physical world. What about possibilities for things to happen? Everything. Everything. If God had originated and maintained the universe by continuously creating and not stopping, there would be no stopping. Stopping wouldn't exist. There wouldn't be the possibility of stopping. Everything would have to be in constant motion. The principle of stopping, that there should be an acceptable state of being where things have stopped has to be brought into existence. Now, stopping, or a principle of being stopped, isn't like a pencil. It doesn't have any mass, doesn't have any inertia, it doesn't have any energy. E equals mc squared is not going to apply to it, being in a stopped condition. But it is a principle. And there are many such ideas that you find in if you take the things that in our tradition and take them carefully and think about them deeply, where you have to use this kind of idea. I'll give you a couple of examples where this became clear to me. I was once speaking in Australia, and I was mentioning a statement of the Ramchal where he says that God has reasons for which things happen, and he manages the world in such a way that whatever events take place, the events should satisfy the reasons that he has for things to happen. And he gives like 12 different reasons why things happen. And then he says, and in addition to all 12 of these, you also have some cases where God will have a certain event happen because it's a means to another event which fulfills one of the purposes. He says that word for word, Ramchal, the end of the second part of the Derech Hashem. So I was speaking to the kollel there, and one of the members of the kollel said to me, why does God need that? Why can't he arrange things so that every event fulfills a purpose? Something which is a means to fulfilling a purpose is a weakness in the system. It means somehow I can't arrange it that everything has its own meaning, has its own value, intrinsic value. No, I have to have some things which only lead to other things which do that. Why did he have to do it that way? Wouldn't the system have been purer and simpler if every event would fulfill the purpose? So I said to him, what a terrific question. That's a terrific question. Ramchal especially sees the Torah as a philosophical system, and he comments in a number of places about the simplicity of the system. So I thought about it for a while, and I thought to myself, okay, maybe God could do that. Maybe God could arrange that every event should directly fulfill a purpose. But we can't live that way. We need to use means to ends. We haven't got the power or the insight to organize every one of our actions to be an action that directly and immediately fulfills an end purpose. A great deal of our lives is spent on working on means, right? Think of working at a job for money. Huh? Right? All of that is just to get money. The money is all of it just a means. That's an awful lot of effort. We talk about your health, we talk about learning a language, we talk about... So, if God didn't do in such a way as to have means and ends wouldn't exist in the world. It wouldn't be a principle that would be available for us, and then we wouldn't be able to do it. Another example. We have on record what would have happened to Adam and Chava had they succeeded at the test in the Garden of Eden and not eaten from the tree of knowledge. What would have happened? We have on record what would have happened. They would have gone into Shabbos, they would have had a certain number of children, and the numbers of the children are known. And then we have a general description how the world would have gone on from there, which means that God set up the world in such a way as, here's what happens if they fail, and all of that is planned out, which is what actually happened. And here's what happens if they don't fail. Now, that's what we call, in our language, contingency plans. Why do you have a plan for both ways? We have a plan for both ways because we don't know what's going to happen. It's either going to rain or it's going to be sunny. I better take my umbrella because of the rain. I better take the suntan lotion because I'll go to the beach. I'll take both of them because I don't know what's going to happen. But God knows what's going to happen. Why would he have set up a description of what would have happened had we succeeded, since he knew beforehand we were going to fail? I think the answer is the same answer. If he didn't make a contingency plan, we wouldn't be able to make contingency plans. The principle of contingency plans wouldn't exist. So here too, this is the principle that Rashi is introducing here. The world needed to have a condition of cessation where things are ceased, not ceasing, but things are ceased, things aren't operating, so that we who live in the world will have the possibility of existing in such a condition. If God didn't do it, it wouldn't have brought it into being, then it wouldn't have been available for us. Now, how do you bring an absence, the principle of absence of activity into the world? You do it by being inactive. So what happened on the seventh day was that on the seventh day there was no malacha done, no, what the word Torah is calls work. You know, that's a mistranslation. We'll talk about it another time. So, right? But by doing no work on the seventh day, God brought something else into being, namely the principle of inactivity, which then became available for us. That seems to be what the Chazal is saying in this second explanation. And it's a very deep thing. Yeah.
Would we be able to say that in his act of not working, he also? Yeah, I think you talked about bringing in rest, but can we say he brought in, like, he created Shabbos by not working?
Well, you see, let's just do one little elementary move. What does the word Shabbos mean? How about to sit? No. How about 7? No. How about return? No. What does Shabbos mean? It means to stop doing, or abstain. That's what it means. Lishbos, modern Hebrew, a shvita is a strike. When the workers strike. Now, of course, that word would imply that beforehand they were working, and that might or might not be true, but that's what it's supposed to mean. Shvita, stop working. So indeed, the word Shabbos means ceasing. There being a cessation. There being something that stopped. That's what it means. And by the way, that's why Shabbos has to come at the end of the week. You can't start the week by stopping. You can only end the week by stopping. That's why it's peculiar that in some calendars of the world, the Sabbath day of the Bible is the first day of the week, Sunday. Right? That's peculiar. Yeah.
This is kind of a two-part question, but does this idea contradict the ideas that are brought down that Hashem creates Yesh V'ayin every nanosecond, every second, all the time? And then the second part of my question is, obviously Hashem is not limited in the sense that creation can only happen under certain circumstances. So couldn't it be that Hashem could have just created this ability to rest, to cease, without having to cease himself?
Okay, so the answer to the first question, Maimonides asked this question in the guide, and the answer is simply that on the first 6 days of creation, he created new categories of things. And on Shabbos, he ceased creating new categories of things. But to be continuously creating elements in the old categories, that he didn't cease. So he didn't cease everything. He ceased what we could call chiddush in that sense. And here, the second question, nothing in what I said implies that he couldn't have done it some other way. Maybe he could have done it in infinite ways. I'm only explaining what he did. Maybe he could have done it in other ways. Nothing that I said would prejudice that question. This is something which, in logic, you have to be very careful about. The difference between a sufficient condition and a necessary condition. The sufficient condition makes something happen. A necessary condition is something without which it wouldn't have happened. Sometimes the condition is both necessary and sufficient, but you have to be very careful not to confuse them. Here's an example where people get confused. A guy is in an accident, and he's taken to the emergency room, and he's in danger of dying. And the doctor does the correct medical procedure, and he lives. So when the guy recovers, he comes to the doctor and says, I want to know, you saved my life. I'm very, very grateful to you. Without you, I'd have been dead. So the doctor says, Not really. If I hadn't been on duty, somebody else would have been on duty. There's always somebody here in the emergency room, 24 hours a day. If I hadn't saved you, someone else would have saved you. Aha. So now, does the patient owe the doctor less gratitude? Because the doctor, although he saved him, wasn't necessary for him to be alive. Because if he hadn't saved him, somebody else would have saved him. I don't think so. I don't think so. He did what saved him. So you have to be very careful not to confuse when A makes something happen, which is called sufficient, versus were A not to be there, the thing wouldn't have happened, which is called necessary. When you're thinking about the relationship between a cause and effect, to keep those separate in your mind, be careful to say what it is you mean. All I said here is that by ceasing, he brought it into existence. I didn't say that had he not ceased, it wouldn't have been possible for him to bring it into existence some other way. That I didn't say. But this is in fact how he did it.
The means of this particular Bria, like the creation, was Hashem's season.
I'm sorry, say that again?
The means of this particular creation of man's ability to cease was Hashem's season. But if he didn't use it that way, if he didn't use that cause, he could have used another cause. That's my understanding.
Let me try to say what I'm saying again, because I don't hear your words relating to what I'm saying. By not doing malacha, work on Shabbos, God brought into being a principle of the possibility of cessation. That's how he did it. If you ask, could he have brought into being that principle in some other manner? I say, I have no clue. Nothing I'm saying is prejudiced on that matter. For all I know, God could have brought it into being in an infinite number of different ways. But we are concerned with a verse. The verse says he completed his work on the seventh day, and that he didn't do any work on the seventh day. That sounds like a contradiction. So the answer in this case is the work of the 6 days, of that he did nothing on the seventh day. But by doing nothing of that work on the seventh day, something came into existence on the seventh day. By his not doing that work, something came into existence, namely rest. That's what happened. And that's how it happened. Could that result have been engineered in some other way? No prejudice. Well, sort of. I have to work hard to make all the details of the analogy come out. But the really interesting philosophical idea is that God has to bring into existence principles of principles that they too need origin. It's not just time, space, and matter. Space, time, and matter, and energy that need it. It's every item in the whole of our universe. Yeah.
I was wondering, how can we compare this to the Mishkan? Because that's where we know the malachas of Shabbos.
How can we compare this to the Mishkan? 1 second.
I heard of an opinion that Shabbos was only given to us because of the Mishkan. We wouldn't have needed it.
Well, this is going now fairly far afield. Here we're talking about God's stopping his process of creation in the 6 days. The Mishkan isn't compared to that. The Mishkan is compared to our stopping the 39 categories of malacha that he told us not to do. It's not compared to God's stopping, as far as I know. The linkage is to our stopping, not to his stopping. Yeah.
I want to make sure I ask this right. By creating rest on Shabbos, did Hashem also create like the Yetzer Hara to not work during the week when it's not Shabbos? Since he commanded us to keep Shabbos?
Okay, let me ask this for the recording here. By creating rest on Shabbos, was God also creating the evil inclination not to work during the week? I would have asked the question in a more, more positive manner. The Ramchal asked the following question: if Shabbos is so wonderful, if Shabbos is so holy, if Shabbos is so great, contributes so much to a person's spirituality, what about a wealthy person who says, I'm going to have 2 Shabbos a week, Tuesday also, Tuesdays and Saturdays. Right? That would be a Yetzer Hara. Not to laze at the beach and skip work, and say that you take it as a work day. But no, to make another holy day during the week. To make another holy day of Shabbos dedicated to meditating on God and communing with God and so on and so on. And Rachel says that's the Yetzer Hara. God knows exactly how much Shabbos the world needs. Exactly how, it needs 1/7, not 2/7, 1/7. He measured these holy things and put them into the world in their exact proportion. Just like, for example, he gives this example of chametz on Pesach, leavened materials, right? And all the literature about how terrible leavened materials are, and how spiritually dulling they are, and how corrupting they are, and so forth and so on. The person says, "Wow, if chametz is so bad, I'm going to give it up. I don't have to eat pizza. Challah for Shabbos? No. Ramchal says chametz is good. It's easily digestible. It's healthy. He didn't have refined flour, and it's good tasting. And chametz is fine. Chametz also carries a certain spiritual dimension. 1 week out of 52, if you refrain from chametz, you will have realized the correct attitude towards that spiritual dimension, and that will carry you through the rest. So the resting on Shabbos is not R&R. It's not watching old movies, on your computer screen. It's a time of positive, focused experience. I'm bordering on a topic that has a lot to say. I'll just add one more thing, and then I'm gonna leave this. You have, let's say, a musical performance. You have the performer and you have the audience. Now, superficially, it looks like the performer is producing the music, and the audience isn't producing anything. They're just receiving. They're just receiving the music, experiencing the music. And then the next thought is, so the performer is active and the audience is passive. That's not correct. Well, I'm thinking of Beethoven. Now, if you're thinking of the Beatles, so maybe it is correct. If you aren't focused, if you aren't paying attention, if you're not familiar with the kind of music that it is, if it's a sitar and you can't hear quarter tones, you're not going to get it. You'll be bored. Because if you aren't engaged and you aren't focused, the music you won't get the music. It won't speak to you. I happen to be a classical musician. When I was younger, I performed many times. When I was in high school, I had a certain piece of music that I really loved, still love. And I had 3 friends, and I got a record. You can read about records in history books. And I sat them down in a room, and I put on this thing, it happened to be the 5th Brandenburg Concerto by Bach, the first movement, the end of which is the long harpsichord solo. So I put this on, and I'm climbing the walls with excitement, and they're sitting there, when is this going to be over? When is this going to be over? And I realized Bach is not available to everyone. Bach is tough. Bach requires attention. There's the ability to follow several different lines of music at the same time and see how they interact with one another. See the beauty in that. So Shabbos is like that. Shabbos is not a time for, I know what we need to do in Israel. We need the Sunday Times on Saturday. That's what we need. Because Saturday's a day off. Then you can sleep till noon, and you can read the 400-page Sunday Times, and you can lounge, and you can have cocktails in bed, and that's not it. That's not it. So Shabbos would not create a Yetzer Hara to rest during the week. Shabbos could only create a Yetzer Hara if it would be a misplaced Yetzer Tov. You'd want the spirituality of Shabbos, and you'd want it more than once a week, like the Ramchal says. You want it on Tuesdays also, and that would be a Yetzer Hara. But the idea of just creating a Yetzer Hara to lounge and let the world pass you by, I don't think that would be the source for that. Okay. Next, 2:18. Oh man, these are deep things. Yeah. Yep. Here we go. This is on page 13 in the blue book. Here the English is excellent, but you have to think. Verse 18, Hashem God said, "It is not good that man be alone." Now I want you to do an exercise. It's a fairly difficult exercise. The verse says, "It is not good that man be alone." I want you to compare that with an almost identical string of words, which it doesn't say. Some translations say it wrongly. How about this string of words? "It is not good for man to be alone." What is the difference between "it is not good that man be alone" versus "it is not good for man to be alone"? What is the difference between those two formulations? Yeah.
One of them is referring to the general good effect, and one is referring to the benefit to the man.
Yeah. I think one's the general effect, the other is the benefit for the man. I think you're right. I would put it this way. Which one of them tells you what's wrong? What's wrong in the picture? What's gone wrong? The second incorrect phraseology, "it's not good for man to be alone," tells you what's wrong. Man is missing something. Man is lacking something. Without that something, he's in trouble. That's what the second phraseology tells you. The first phraseology does not tell you what's wrong. It doesn't even hint at what's wrong. It says, "It's not good that man be alone." It means man's being alone is not good. Why is it not good? Those words don't tell you. That's why Rashi here, who comes to tell you what's wrong, is specifically attacking the words on the page. He's telling you what's wrong because he knows that the words don't tell you what's wrong. And as you'll see, he doesn't say what's wrong is that man's missing something. He doesn't say that. Here Rashi is working with the exact translation of the words, which can easily be missed. Let's just take a look at Rashi. Yeah? Genesis 2:18. "It is not good, lest people say, there are two dominions. The Holy One, blessed be He, is alone among heavenly beings, and He has no mate. And this one, man, among the earthly creatures, has no mate." Man's being alone. What do you mean alone? There were lots of animals around. There were trees. There were stones. There were clouds. There were the sun and the moon. He wasn't the only thing. Alone here means unique. Nothing else like him. The problem with man's being absolutely unique, singular and unique, would be that man would be related to the rest of the creation as God is related to, so to speak, his heavenly hosts above. Just as God is unique among the heavenly hosts above, so man is unique among all the lower creations. And an observer could say, well, then there are two dominions and each one has its God. The creator above in his dominion, and this creature here in the lower dominion. Now, and that's what needs to be rectified. This is the key to the next step, the creation of woman. This is going to carry tremendous implication. But let's let me just push this just a little bit. The problem is that an observer could say, who? Observer? The cows? What observer are we talking about? There isn't any observer. Is a problem really a problem if it could go wrong in a way in which it's not really going to go wrong because the preconditions aren't right? Why do you call that a problem? If you know it's not going to go wrong, leave it that way. There aren't going to be any observers. So I believe that what the Chazal that Rashi is quoting here mean to imply is that not only some other observer could make a mistake, but he himself could make the mistake. He looks at himself, he looks at the whole of the lower creation, he thinks, I'm very significantly superior to everything else down here. So I'm in charge. So it's my dominion. Just like God is unique and superior to everything above, so I'm unique and superior to everything below, and I'm it. Right? So that shows that it's not that he's missing something for himself. It's not that he's lacking something. It's that this misimpression about his status is the problem. Now let's draw one logical conclusion from this. So the solution is going to be the creation of woman. Quiz time. Is it possible that the woman that God creates should be inferior to the man?
The parts, same thing.
If it was inferior, there wouldn't be no point.
If he creates a woman that's inferior to a man, then he hasn't solved the problem. It's just like another cow, or another horse, or another mountain, or another cloud, another thing he's superior to. He's still unique. He's still above everything else. So the same mistake could be made. Only if she's his equal does she solve the problem. This carries a gigantic implication. This alone says that she has to be equal. If she's not equal, you can't solve the problem. Yeah.
Why shouldn't she be superior?
Because then she'll have the problem. Logic 101. If she's going to be superior, then she'll have the problem. She'll be the uniquely superior one to everything else. You want to say something?
Yeah, men and women are inherently different, right? Like, we're not exactly the same.
Yeah, but the men and women are different. They're not exactly the same. But equality does not imply identity. I'll give you a couple of examples. Let's take a Beethoven violin sonata, the Kreutzer sonata. So you have a violin and a piano. Violins and pianos are very, very different. I'm sure you're aware of that, right? Is the violin superior to the piano? The piano superior to the violin? They both contribute equally to making the music. They both have to play equally hard. So equality doesn't mean they have to be identical. They have to be equally valuable. Now, in our, I mean, this is the capstone of 25 pages of work, but in our circles, what is the success of a life? What is the crowning success of a life, the greatest possible success of a life? One success of the life is prophecy. Prophecy is the closest relationship that a human being can have with God. The Jewish tradition attests that in the 1,000 years of prophecy, there were an equal number of men and women who were prophets, which means that this position was accomplished equally by men and women. Another such test of the greatness of a life is what's called death by a divine kiss. And we are on record that 3 people experienced that: Moses, Aaron, and Miriam. 3 siblings. So we're talking about the Torah's measure of the success of a life. Men and women are figuring equally, even though they're different in their qualities, but they are figuring equally. So that's the idea that man and if she's not an equal, then she doesn't solve the problem. Yeah.
What's the issue with man being superior to the things around him? I know you brought that point up before to show why women would be equal, but what's the problem with that concept?
What's the problem with it?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't say there was any problem with that concept.
Oh, so
No, but he's not uniquely superior. God is the one above who's superior to everything else. If you're going to have two, then you're not, A is not superior to B, and B is not superior to A. So that's superior to everything in his context. That is not analogous to God.
I mean, for man, though, you said that there had,
Man means atom.
yeah.
A single I don't understand your question.
So can, so it could have been made that, it could have made, wouldn't be the right word here, but I'm still confused on the concept of why woman had to be equal to man. You mentioned before, woman had to be equal because if she was beneath, then man would be superior. But what's the issue with that? Unless I'm misunderstanding again.
What's the problem? The problem is because he is uniquely superior to everything else in his realm, he's going to be mistaken for a kind of God. Okay? How do you correct that? You stop him from being uniquely superior to everything in his realm. If you create a woman and she's inferior to him, you have not stopped him from being uniquely superior to everything in his realm. You just gave another thing that he's superior to. You haven't solved the problem. Yeah.
So would a good wife be a wife that checks his husband's ego?
Those are the next words in the verse, and we're going to do them tomorrow. We're running out of time.